And we thank you, Riley, for remembering to start the recording. And we ask for your help in doing that. E2 Tech is looking specifically for new board members and new committee members right now. Our annual meeting is coming up in a couple of months, so if you're interested in getting more involved with E2 Tech, now's the time to reach out. We welcome your involvement. I keep people up to date. This is a members only benefit. I try to put whatever I've learned in this policy updates and news. We don't advocate at E2 Tech, we don't lobby, but we do track. And so things that we turn up that I think will be interesting to the members I put in here. And so that's a members only benefit. So check that from time to time. I try to get something in there every week. And everything we do this year is brought to you by the Horizon Fund. So we thank them for all of their work and their support to us. And we also work extensively with the Maine Technology Institute. Perhaps you saw the news of the Clean Energy Innovation Awards, two $250,000 grants that just went out to innovative Maine companies, Farmhand Innovation and Peregrine Turbine Technologies, each benefiting from the big award. And we were part of helping make sure that the best companies were selected and that as many Maine companies as could be identified applied. And a fun aside is that that award was made possible by one of prominent E2 Tech members' company's growth and basically paying MTI back. So a triple win there. We're pretty proud of that one. So get involved with Maine Technology Institute. If you need help reaching out to them, let me know. We couldn't do this without Burns and Mac, sustaining champion, have been for many years, and Bernstein Sure, Power Market, SMRT. These are companies that make all of our work all year long possible. Of course, Bernstein Sure, great law firm. Power Market is community solar, powermarket.io. SMRT, architects and engineers, known for healthcare and lots of green building projects, doing tons of good work around the country, based right here in Portland. And I always like to linger on this slide. We're very lucky to have all of these sustaining partners. This sustaining partner membership is $1,000 a year. It helps keep E2 Tech going. And we really appreciate your consideration there, staying part of that program. And up in the upper right, if you see that Iron House logo, that's our newest sustaining partners. Thanks so much to the Iron House team. They are consulting engineers in environmental projects and utility projects based in Lewiston. So be sure to turn to them or any of the other sustaining partners for your needs. And this group here, year-round, TRC, our board chair, Tom Eschner, is from TRC, and VHB, great environmental firms. And then if you'd like a print edition of the Maine Biz, great magazine, just send us a note at info@e2tech.org and we will get that to you. We have a great event coming up, a tour. It's an outdoor tour held an event with everything catered and provided by the team at Waterstone Property Group. This is the developer of Rock Row in Westbrook. But of great interest, and one of the major reasons we wanted to do this is they are also the developer of Greentown Labs in Boston, so Waterstone, and in Houston. So Waterstone is a very significant innovation developer that has built these innovation hubs around the country with great success. And we do a lot with clean tech entrepreneurship here at E2 Tech, and pretty excited about Waterstone coming to Maine. And this Rock Row is one of the biggest, it might actually be the biggest property development in Maine history. The top line budget is somewhere around $600 million. So all that's there now is a market basket, but there's a ton that's coming. And so you'll get a chance to see it, and an interesting use of innovative building techniques, including cross-laminated or mass timber. We'll have a big Q&A, and everything soup to nuts provided by the team at Waterstone and sponsored by Perkins Thompson. So food trucks, chilled beverages, everything in an outdoor setting. with a tent if the weather's bad. So that one's, we're capping registration at 75. You can see we already have 37. So sign up. We'd love to see you there. And so this is meant to be participatory. This is a Zoom meeting. We've all been to 1,000 of them. You can turn your mic on and off. Probably leave it off during Ike's talk. I promise to shut up. But then you don't need to be bashful. We want this to be a back and forth. Obviously, it's a little harder to do some of these things in person than it used to be. So this is meant to be a chance to interact a little bit. And so this is my last slide, and I'll take this down in a second, and then I can kick things off for us and talk about algae. You can see his bio there, and lots of interest in this topic, and we're really excited to hear about it. So Ike, the floor is yours. Thanks so much for joining us here at E2 Tech. We're looking forward to hear what you have to say about this remarkable organism of algae.
Well, thanks very much, Martin, and for the invitation and opportunity to chat here today. Let's see if I can figure out how to make this disappear. I name it. There we go. Oh, that's the wrong one.
It's looking good. And yeah,
good.
If you.
All right. From the beginning.
Beautiful.
Okay, so I'm here today to chat about all things algae, and to start with the economics and the opportunities both in Maine and abroad for algae. Maine is one of the leading states in the country for kelp farming. It's a renaissance for seaweed farming in the state of Maine, and it was started in the 1990s by my company, Coastal Plantations International. It still remains the largest seaweed farm in the history of the United States. But why algae? So the first thing is, why not algae? This slide from Global Algae may be a wee bit optimistic, but if Global Algae out of San Diego and Kauai, Hawaii are on track, their new technologies of microalgae farming will supplant millions of acres of land-based agriculture, saving trillions of tons of water and the Colorado River, for instance, in terms of substituting for some of the land-based plants for animal feeds, human food, aquaculture feeds, and biofuels. And so it's a remarkable opportunity. We can spend hours going through all of these issues that are listed here, and you might scratch your head in terms of how do you prevent mass extinction with algae. And I'm happy to go through every one of these, but obviously we don't have time today. This is just a slide to wet your whistle, to just give you just a hint of the global effect that a massive farming of both microalgae on land and seaweeds in the open ocean can have. So you saw this first picture. This is the seaweed farm in Cobscook Bay, and in the background, the land is, of course, is New Brunswick. But I don't know if you're familiar with algae, so we'll just do a wee bit of review. So on the upper right, you have microalgae or phytoplankton. You can't see the individual cells, but obviously you can see them growing in these flasks versus seaweed. They're all algae, and there are about 30,000 different kinds, but there's only about a dozen to 15 that are currently commercialized and domesticated. And the one in the upper left is nori, used in sushi bars, as you can see on the bottom. That was a picture of our sheets that we would sell mostly in Japan in the 1990s. But there are other superfoods. Spirulina is a cyanobacteria, a blue-green algae that has massive health benefits, but it also is the source of a natural blue dye that will become the dye for blue M&Ms. And so algae is everywhere, and currently we've almost doubled the market in the last 6 to 7 years. So then why should the US care about algae, and in this particular seaweeds? I don't know if this is getting in the way. Okay. As you can see in the blue surrounding the continental United States and our protectorates around the world, our economic exclusive economic zone totals almost or a little bit over 11 million square kilometers. And if we were to utilize a good portion of these offshore areas for seaweed farming in the coastal United States and Alaska, kelp, there's a renaissance of kelp farming around Puerto Rico. They're looking at eucuma and sargassum, and in the islands in the Pacific, eucuma and capophycus, all either commercial red or commercial brown algae that have massive potential. And in terms of biofuel, if they were to follow some of the leads of the current 60 million that ARPA-E, a division of Department of Energy, has invested in offshore seaweed farming, we're looking at about 500 million dry metric tons and about 10% of the nation's liquid transportation fuel. So algae, in terms of its potential both as a biofuel, a biofeed, a biofood, and biochemicals is massive. So why can't I move it forward? Here we go. So what does an algae farm look like? And so for microalgae, you can either do open farms, as you see on the left-hand side, or closed farms that you see on the right-hand side. Oddly enough, right now, some of the largest microalgae farms in the world are in Iceland. Why? Because Iceland electricity is the cheapest in the world and heat is free due to geothermal. So what do you need to grow algae but heat, CO2, and electricity in the form of LED lights? All of that is unbelievably cheap right now in Iceland. Maine has started a collaboration with Algal Life. And so, again, we're starting cross ocean connections with the North Atlantic countries. And in terms of large open or open water algae farms around the world, in the upper left is Cyanotech. If you look on the long row on the left-hand side of the Cyanotech, that was my first algae farm. We started it at the same time. It was a seaweed farm. Started about the same time that Jerry Krzyzewski started Cyanotech. And the bottom right-hand side is Symbiotic in Ashkelon, Israel, just north of the Gaza Strip. And when I worked there for a wee bit, some of the rockets that you've been hearing about whizzed by one day. So again, some algae can be hazardous to your health. But these are what algae closed or microalgae farms look like on the commercial scale. And so what are you going to get out of algae? Here you see Haematococcus, a green algae, but when you piss it off, it turns into a cyst really, really hard, and it could last for many, many years, and it turns blood red. If you've ever had a concrete bird bath and it turns sort of rust at the bottom of the bird bath, that's Haematococcus. And this is the dye, could be 4 to 6% of the entire body weight of these algal cysts. And once you crack them open, you know, it comes out blood red. This is the dye that goes up the food chain, starting with Haematococcus to shrimp, to small fish, to larger fish. And that's how salmon become pink. That's how flamingos become pink, all from this algae, Haematococcus. And in terms of feedstocks, the reason I put this one, about 20, almost 30 years ago, Karina asked me to come up with a diet for chickens to lower the cholesterol in eggs. And we were pretty successful. The only problem was there was too much iodine in the diet. And yes, you could lower your cholesterol, but you'd end up glowing in the dark. So that was less than successful. But here it shows that algal-based food, for instance, in the salmon market, could replace fish meal. If you have the ability to replace fish meal, you have the ability of maintaining fish stocks that are dangerously low around the planet. And why I have a Holstein here is you've all heard about cow burps and cow farts, and the fact that there's a specific tropical red algae called Asparagopsis, that if you feed 2% of a cattle feed made up of algae to the cattle, it will reduce and near eliminate a methanogenesis out of cows. And they're the largest natural source of methane in terms of greenhouse gases. So it's a remarkable possibility. Ecological services from algae is remarkable. Algae can clean up nitrogen, as you see on the right-hand side. They can clean up phosphorus. They can clean up biochemicals. They can clean up radioactivity. I have students in New Mexico that are cleaning up uranium from waste lakes in uranium mines. And so algae has an amazing ability to be a super absorber of metals, organics, and nutrients out of the water. We call that bioremediation. And then biomaterials. About 4 years ago, they developed the first algal-based surfboard. It's fun. Let's just say I needed a really large surfboard to carry me, but it was quite fun to be on an algal-based surfboard. But that led to the development of other polymers. And the beauty of what you see here today, especially with the flip-flops and the sneakers, is that these are biodegradable plastics made out of algae. And so Adidas has ordered 400,000 pairs of sport shoes. And so when Adidas places an order like this, the future of algal-based polymers is unlimited. There are companies specialized in it. Algix was one of the leaders of developing algal-based polymers for plastics. But Steve Mayfield out of University of Southern Cal, of San Diego, University of California, San Diego is a world pioneer in developing these new products and biopolymers from algae. And so Algae Biotechnology has developed a whole bunch of new products. In terms of what you see, baby food, infant formula, the DHA and EPA for heart and brain development come from a modified microalgae that are grown in the dark. And so, in fact, in the United States, DSM, which bought out Martech, and Corbion are the largest sellers of microalgae, and they grow it all in the dark. And so on the left, you see what can we get out of the biomass we grow. And so lipids can be either used, if they're omega-3s or PUFAs, they can be used in human applications. The proteins, whether it's for dog food, fish food, cattle food, or human protein sources. The carbs can be fermented into ethanol for biofuels, and residuals, whether it's ash or minerals, can be used in soil amendments and soil elicitors. And other algal-based products. Again, you see a whole plethora here that we've talked about, but the important thing here is what is the value of the biomass? And so you can see that Feedstocks right now between $100 and $500 a kilogram represents the ability of multiple value streams, with, of course, biofuels being the least valuable, but of course the largest market. And on the bottom, you can see the really high-end products that can be developed from different algae. The carotenoids, astaxanthin from Amatococcus, alpha-phycocyanin and phycocyanin from spirulina, and so on and so forth. And so if you go to any health food store, you see massive amounts of algal-based products. Okay, why can't I get it to go forward? There we go. And then the last bit, of course, is some from seaweeds. You have anything that comes from that is smooth or thick or creamy. They come from commercial red algae, carrageenan and agar. But have you seen some horror movies, which I must admit, I have not seen this horror movie, but the entire monster and all his gooey, gummy stuff coming out of his mouth, and the head and the whatever, all of that is molded from algae. So algae, you know, when I talk to young people and I say, how many people have eaten algae today? Nobody raises their hand. But if you ask them if they brushed their teeth or had chocolate milk or ice cream, they then raise their hands. And then you say, well, you know, you've been eating algae all day long. So lots of uses. So now I'm just going to take a wee bit of time. What excites me these days is the fact that not only am I a professor at University of Southern Maine, I'm the president of the Algae Foundation, and we are funded by the Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture, and private foundations. And in the last 4 years, we've reached over 100,000 students on all matters of algal bioeconomy training and or education. We're in 101 countries, and those are the countries in dark green. And on the United States map, you can see the cities in which we are, which we've served. On the upper right-hand corner, you can see the 6 different efforts of the Algae Foundation and ATEC, which stands for the Algae Technology Educational Consortium. We have a K-12 effort that reaches about, this year, I think about 7,000 Maine students. And this year we'll do probably over 50,000 students nationwide. We have massive open online courses through Coursera called the Algal MOOCs, and that's reached about 23,000 students. We have college courses and college degrees, one in algae farming and one in algae biotechnology. We also have, for existing aquaculturists, extension training. We have aquaculture extension courses for both seaweed and for microalgae. And lastly, a new program is this micro-credential badging program, which allows people who are looking for jobs. So if we have those folks, let me see if I go back. The micro-credentialing is about testing people for skills. These are digitally based through a claim. And so an employer can go online. Credly bought out the claim. So Credly is now the online base for these badges. If someone comes in for a job, they hand over their resume with their digital badges, and the employer can go instantly online to check the credentials and also the skills that are represented by each badge, which certifies that this candidate has been certified to be proficient in a number of skills. And all of our skills comes from our industrial advisory board. So that brings the relevance to all of our curriculum, that these are the skill sets needed to be successful in the algal-based commercial world. Now, I may have forgotten to get rid of Jake's overview, but this is about the Algae Academy and our growth. I'm going to talk over Jacob because I probably can't figure out how to turn him off. But you can see this year or last year we converted to online, so we did have a dip. But on the right, you can see what we're scheduled to do this year. And the team pictured is our curriculum development team for the K-12 effort. Good. And then in terms of what we do for colleges, mostly for community colleges, but now we're finding that universities are adopting our system. And so you can see here, we've had about 250 students. All of our graduates are either gotten jobs at algae companies or have gone on to finish a bachelor's, and some even graduate school. Due to COVID, actually a wee bit before COVID, we've converted all of the 5 new classes that make up this certificate program in the controlled agricultural degree have been moved online. And so that helped during COVID, of course. This is on the bottom, you can see both indoor and outdoor laboratories. And the most popular course on the left-hand side is pumps and motors, in terms of not only do you have to know the biology and the art and science of growing algae, but you also have to know how to fix stuff. Because if you're in the desert on an algae farm, you just can't make a phone call and someone's going to show up. So in terms of diagnosing problems, electricity, remote sensing, pumps, motors, piping, they get all of these skill sets included in the degree program. Our second is the biotechnology. Instead of individual classes, we have developed algal-based labs that are inserted in all of the different existing biotechnology courses. at our partners. ATEC signs up what we call our member schools. We have 25 community colleges and universities around the country that adopt our curriculum. They can take some of it, all of it. In this case, in terms of biotechnology, we have 3 separate lab courses. Each one has between 5 and 8 separate laboratories, and they can take some of them, all of them. The intensive are meant to be full 1 week long, 1 credit courses. Some just take, some schools just take 1 or 2 labs, some do the entire course. But to make it easier for everyone, we develop a new product called IGSOPs, or Image Guided Standing Operating Procedures. This is a teaching device for the instructors who may be brand new in this effort, and it helps them, you know, in minutia detail, work through these very complicated laboratories. That makes them more successful, reducing frustration and increasing adoption of our laboratories for people who may not be akamai, oh, wrong word, that's Hawaiian, knowledgeable in algal-based instruction. And on the bottom, just showing that now universities are adopting our curriculum, which we're very excited about, which we hadn't intended. So we are growing. We are now developing curriculum for growing algae in the dark. We have just been awarded an additional $500,000 for the Algae Challenge Cup, an 18-month contest with top prizes of $50,000 for the winning team to develop new algal-based technologies. That will be announced October 1st, I believe, although there is some talk about changing the name to be more exciting than the Algae Challenge Cup. So my job is to not only spread these opportunities nationally, but in my arrangement with the University of Southern Maine is to develop opportunities specific to Maine. They include the Algae Camp, which we ran for the first time this past summer. It includes special relationships with Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Ireland, developing the North Atlantic corridor for algae exploitation and commercialization, and a special collaboration with the Maine Math and Science Alliance to support special algae prizes in science fair and to recruit and train K through 12 teachers in offering the Algae Academy's K through 12 STEM kits, which we provide free. In fact, everything you've heard today, we provide free to every school that we're in contact with in the United States and 3 different countries. So there you have it. I'd love to chat. I'm here as long as you want in terms of questions either about the algae world, commercial potential of algae in Maine or the world. What are the different companies in Maine who are involved in the kelp renaissance? Or we talk about the Algae Foundation and how it's the #1 rated funded program in the Department of Energy for 4 years in a row. So we are well funded and we are well rated by external peer review and merit review within the Department of Energy. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'll stop sharing if I can figure out how to do that.
Great, Ike, thank you. Yeah, this is good. So this is, yeah, while you're taking the screen, the sharing down, I have come up with a few questions, but in the best scenario is our participants ask questions, which are always much better than my somewhat lame questions. But I do wonder how I can get one of those I Love Algae t-shirts. That seems like a must-have.
Well, if I can figure out how to get the hell out of this, if anyone could stop sharing for me.
No, I can't remember how to do that. Hold on. But
my
anyway.
Screen went sort of blank. But in terms of t-shirts, we give them away to our master teachers. We give them away to our ATEC volunteers. But Marissa Nally, our Director of Operations, perfect. Thank you so much. We're going to start selling them. We have an array of fun t-shirts that we've given away as thank you gifts to our volunteers. But a lot of our teachers who adopt the Algae Academy If they're master teachers, they get them, but a lot of the other teachers would like them. This year, we're going to close out the Algae Academy at 400 teachers, which represents about 53,000 students. So, but on the website, we'll be selling these t-shirts.
Oh, excellent. So, okay, and ask, would you please turn your camera on and give me a little smile or a big smile, and I will do a little screenshot for the E2 Tech Twitter, and I'll tag you Southern Maine, which is where Ike teaches. And I also find that this smiling has the effect of wanting you to engage and ask a question. I know that Bobby Lamont is here from Maine Angels, and we want to get into the startup and business development world too. But on three, that big smile, please. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay, I got you. So we don't have to be formal about this. I can, if you, Bobby, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Well, I'll ask your question because I had the exact same question. I would love to hear more about startups in Maine that you are either working with or know about.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. There are about 50 kelp farmers that have taken out leases. Most of them are either lobstermen or mussel farmers who are adding seaweed lines because farming kelp starts in October and ends in March, April, May. And so it's an off season. And so it's a lovely way for additional efforts. There's Maine Ocean. There are several processing companies that are expanding. In fact, there was just an article about 2 weeks ago of a massive expansion in Southern Maine, which is great news because these farmers have to have someone guarantee purchasing the biomass. And so you have to have local processing. And so if you've been in Portland, there's Heritage Seaweed in the Old Port. I believe it's on India Street, an entire shop dedicated for algae. It is spectacular. I took my algae camp there and they had a blast. I mean, from art to books to clothing to soaps to tea. Of course, one of my students asked, well, can you roll it and smoke it? I said, not particularly, but bigger kids are going to ask those kind of questions. But Maine and Alaska are the epicenters of kelp farming in the United States.
Well, you happen to name the two I already know about. And while you were giving a shout out to Josh Rogers, I love what he's done with Seaweed Week, and I hope that will continue to exist. Atlantic Sea Farms is a Maine Angels portfolio company, so I know they are pretty much buying up all of the sugar kelp. So I guess I was looking for more of the other uses. Medallion Bioplastics works with someone at UMaine, so maybe you're familiar with that one, but I think they've moved away from seaweed right now. And I just was wondering, but it sounds like
well, most of the bioplastics, for instance, there's not enough micro or macroalgae to fulfill the orders. So in the absence of algal-based bioplastics, they're using land-based plants to fulfill the biomass requirements. But the beauty is having biodegradable plastics is the victory, whether it's land-based agriculture or algae-based bioplastics. It's a spectacular advancement in terms of the ocean plastics pollution. Most of the support systems, whether it's seed development, biotechnology of algae, is not based in Maine. Unfortunately, the 90s, our farm had to close down due to vandalism in water conflicts with urchin and scallop draggers. And in fact, we had to arm our boats with rifles. It was a range war in Cobscook Bay. And so we lost. And so, I took my farm overseas and imported my my algae, which I still do to this day. Biotechnology centers are UCSD, UConn, University of Texas, Arizona State University, and Global Algae and Qualitas Health. Those are some of the leaders in the United States for developing new technology in algae cultivation, seed cultivar enhancement. You have Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and the Mariner program for offshore seaweed. There's about 60 million invested there, about 28 projects. Those reports will be due in the next 18 months. So the question is, will the Department of Energy follow that up with approximately 30 million a year that they spend now on microalgae research? So in 12, 13 years, they've reduced the cost of microalgae production about 90%. And so they have another 5-6% to go to get it in the realm of industrialization of microalgae, and keep an eye out for global algae to reach that level.
Yeah, and I think Bobby and Maine Angels are a great resource if for startups or for opportunities here in Maine, and hopefully we can bring some of that back.
Please do, because actually, if you don't mind, add, there is the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, along with SEAHAD, have received a USDA seafood sprint grant, which includes seaweed, and we are in close communication with them about how they're kind of figuring out how to spend the money as they're going along and looking. I would love to connect you to Donna Hazard, because this is they're all about trying to educate people about opportunities. So you are right up. You're a great connection. So I sent you a LinkedIn request, so we'll follow up.
Yeah, and I'll close that loop too.
Thank you.
Looks like maybe Shaylin has a question.
I remember reading an article last year about plans to grow kelp that would sequester a large amount of carbon and then sinking them to the bottom of the ocean somewhere. I was just curious, because we talked mainly about microalgae. Are there any other commercial uses for the large kelpy algae?
Well, kelp right now, 99% of all kelps are grown in China, and China is used as a source. Not China's used. The kelp is used as a source of alginate, another phycocolloid similar to agar and carrageenan. They're used for a source of potash, a source of iodine, a source of fertilizer, and a source of soil conditioner and fertilizer. So you're going to have to, because of all the hype for microalgae 10 years ago, almost sunk the industry. The hype that's now starting with seaweeds, you have to be very careful with. And so people who really know what they're talking about, let's just say we sometimes have to shudder when you hear claims like that. For the people who talk about, yes, fair amount of carbon is going to be captured. Every ton of kelp is going to capture 1.5 tons of carbon. Yeah, no problem about that. But the sinking, the hydrodynamic forces involved with sinking of biomass is not as simple, certainly not as simple as the people, including Jacques Cousteau's granddaughter, claim. And so whether that's a viable sequestration of carbon, that's really to be seen. The other things you've heard perhaps is massive kelp farming will prevent acidification or mitigate acidification of the ocean. It may mitigate a micro environment, but quarter mile away from the farm, it'll have no effect. So you really have to be cautious about the grand claims, which started with the Koreans, which helped fund a massive expansion of their seaweed farming research budget from the government. But without the hype, seaweeds and microalgae have a massive place in the 21st century bioeconomy.
Oh, that's excellent. Good back and forth there. Alina, it looks like maybe you have a question.
Yeah, I do. I'm not sure if you have mentioned that, but are any of the algae, like a local algae growing farms, are publicly traded?
Oh, that's a great question. Did you say local
Local,
algae
yes.
companies? No, I know of no listings of local algae companies. Many of them have sold privately shares, and in fact, when my company, Coastal Plantations, had the #2 at Merrill Lynch, the #2 at the Deutsche Bank, and the president of IBM Asia as part of our board. But in terms of publicly traded, I think Cyanotech is listed. Certainly DSM is listed. Corbion is a European country, I believe is listed. Earthrise is owned by the Japanese, so I don't think it's listed. That's about it.
You could have a whole algae portfolio if you wanted to, and then the blue M&Ms too, right? That was a fun.
Well, Frank Mars has been a major investor in algae. He owns a small algae biotech company in Phoenix, and they specialize in plant elicitors, spraying algae mixtures on plants, getting them to grow 30–40% faster because of some of the plant hormones that are found in algae. But he's been the Mars, not the family, but just Frank Mars has been a huge proponent of algal development. And that one, getting the approval of phycocyanin to be a blue dye in M&Ms, that one approval by the USDA and the FDA doubled the world biomass requirements for spirulina.
That's remarkable. Well, yeah, speaking of large requirements, Seth Hall from E2 Tech member S&J Llama LLC. Seth, sounded like you had a question.
Yes, thanks very much. I do. In addition to my own business, I'm a tangential partner and investor in Maine Shellfish Developers, which is located in wonderful mid-coast Waldoboro at the Waldoboro Industrial Park next to Ocean Organics, which has long been involved with seafood processing and all kinds of interesting stuff related to that. My interest is a little different in terms of the massive scale of large physical scale algae. We're interested in shellfish feed, and I wondered what Ike might know about larger scale efforts or scalable efforts in Maine, particularly, to develop algae as shellfish feed in particular, perhaps finfish as well. We, as you probably know, hatcheries use a fair amount of algae grown locally. It's very expensive, and we're investigating as research projects how to advance this progress. I just wondered what this group, and Ike in particular, might know globally about Maine, about who else is doing this kind of thing in Bigelow Labs and so forth we're aware of. Is anybody seriously looking at scaling up this particular feedstock potential?
Well, that's not a new issue, and thank you. It's a great question. Shellfish hatcheries, the Darling Center is doing a lot of work with microalgae cultivation. Obviously, Bigelow and Mike Lomas. Let's see, who else? Reed Aquaculture sells microalgae for shellfish hatcheries. Mook Sea Farms does a pretty good job. One of their hatchery or their algae manager used to work for me up in Cobscook Bay. So distance is an issue in terms of fresh versus freeze-dried. And so there's no market in mass shipment of live algae because you're essentially shipping and paying for water. And so Cunelli agrosystems in Hawaii, maybe one of the finest grower of microalgae. Their business plan failed because they were selling gallons of microalgae in live cultures, shipping them from Hawaii, and that just couldn't be sustainable. And so the question is, how do you localize a national effort that is close to the markets when the markets are, separated by 3,000 miles of inland? So it's a difficult. University of New England was a leader. The University of Maine was a leader. Their phycologist is retiring. University of Maine in Orono had at one point probably 3 of the top 50 phycologists in the world. One retired, one moved away, and the third one is retiring, I believe, this year. So I don't know what is going to happen at UMaine Orono for the future.
Great, thank you very much. And just as a quick follow-up, we are confronting the live algal feed problem exactly as you described, and it might be worthwhile just to keep an eye on Maine shellfish developers in Waldeboro and see what our reports are producing. We've been pretty successful grant funding wise so far, and we hope to develop this for use in the statewide shore-based shellfish husbandry use, which is really, it's a niche, but it could be an enormously Maine-centric thing, particularly because of the shipping issues you mentioned, having to ship around live products.
Well, Seth, we have a chapter in our extension course for shellfish algal growth out of the University of, it's the Connecticut Shellfish Laboratory at Milford. It has a world expert and has a course there. I don't know if your people have gone down there, but you can certainly see part of that course free of charge on our algae cultivation extension short courses on our website.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, I'll make some connections there, Seth, and if you don't mind, send me a little info. We'll send everybody a follow-up with the link to the recording and so forth. And Seth, we can put some info about your work at Maine Shellfish Developers, and I want to make sure that Bobby Lamont from Maine Angels knows about it as well. And speaking of Bobby, she put in the chat a link to this public resources calendar that she keeps, and don't fail to click on that. Bobby does a really remarkable job with those calendars. It's a really good way to stay informed, and there's one specific for this sector, and there's tons of good stuff going on. So make sure you check that out. I want to make sure that Linda and Crystal and Nick are ready to feel free to pop up with any questions.
There was a question that popped up in writing about seaweed and bioremediation of human waste. And essentially all of the Chinese coast from Qingdao up to the Korean border is one giant remediation project because the most aquacultured biomass in the world are kelps in China. And there's no secret in terms of the nutrient or the eutrophication of coastal waters in China. And by looking at what happened at the Beijing Olympics and the overexplosion that shut down the sailing and ocean swim. And so unfortunately, using seaweeds in open waters to mitigate excess nutrients, it's difficult to control. And what escapes then is, it's difficult to corral coastal pollution. What's being used more is microalgae in secondary and tertiary ponds in wastewater. In fact, there's a whole new generation of wastewater treatment plant algal-based technologies that are we're partnering to develop some curriculum around. So yeah, that's all I can say about that, I guess.
That's really, really interesting. I want to go to a trackability question. So Bhaskar is an E2 Tech member who is a great blockchain expert. And you talked, Ike, a little bit about path to market. So Bhaskar, you want to jump in and ask about that?
Yeah, my question is more about the supply chain, and I'm kind of wondering or curious whether there is a need or a benefit or an impact from tracking and tracing algae. And what I really mean, you can start with the algae or the omics or the chemistry or RNA, DNA type thing, and take that signature, how it's grown. You talked about, in shade and light and darkness, and then shipped in various fashions and then move to the market. And whether there is a need to differentiate the different types of algae, IRA's algae versus something else. And is there a real final benefit in branding it, something like whiskey from Scotland or bourbon from Kentucky? But it's a question that we should probably ask. And then how we do it, there are some digital methods of doing it. But before I jump into that, I want to know if there is, even if it makes an impact.
Well, for instance, it does, certainly. From a quality standpoint of view, there are organic Indian microalgae that does not receive nearly the price of US-based microalgae because of the flavor profile and the water quality. So yes, in terms of when we had our farm in Japan, we would sell all of our live sheets, not locally, but we would ship them to Japan in gift boxes because Maine has a massive reputation for clean nature. And so branding it as the Maine Nori Company wasn't by accident. It was branded that way to capture what the Japanese feel about the coastal cleanliness and nature of Maine. In terms of whether or not you can have patent like Roundup Ready seeds like Monsanto, there are efforts afoot of genetically modifying seaweeds for offshore use, but understanding the fact that the social capital and the regulatory reviews would be resistant, they're also trying to breed sterile seaweed so they could grow, single generation could grow and have extra biomass or specific products within the biomass, but they couldn't reproduce in nature. So there are those efforts afoot. But in terms of branding individual kelps, because much of them will be ground up, certainly, unlike oysters that are branded, probably less so with algae.
That's a really good question. I always love hearing that the Maine brand is a strong one. We got Ike time for one final question, which is a good one, and it comes from Crystal. Maybe one or two most unusual applications of algae that you're aware of. I think I wrote down the blue and maybe the pink, but what else is out there?
Well, my first job coming out of University of Hawaii was $5 million from the NIH to find anti-cancer and anti-HIV compounds from cyanobacteria, while at the same time, the Department of Defense gave us money to see if those exact same compounds could be biotoxins. And so I had two hats at the same time, trying to save the world and then not save the world. So that was a wee bit odd. I do have a 0.5% somewhere in testing of an anti-HIV compound from algae. So that's that. And the fact my second job, well, actually before that, was the polar bear at the New York Central Park Zoo turned green. And the children were aghast. And so they, in 1976, they brought my boss down and he brought me down to New York for a week of consulting as to why the polar bear turned green. And it turns out polar bear hair is hollow. And because they didn't chill the water, green algae got into the tips of the polar bear hair and turned them green. And so that was kind of a cool application. And the fact that I've collected algae inside of volcanoes, active volcanoes in Hawaii, icebergs off of Newfoundland, snow algae on the top of Mauna Kea in Hawaii. The weirdest application was at 975 feet deep on the new island of Lohi that's emerging from the southeast corner of the Big Island. In a submarine, we turned the lights on, and there was a massive seaweed outcropping in 1/1,000,000th of a foot candle of light. So I'd have to say that was the weirdest. Pitch black, 1/1,000,000th of 1 foot candle. There was a luxuriant population of algae growing.
Oh, it's just amazing all the places that your career in this has led you. That's so great. Well, I thank you. I hope everybody will give Dr. Levine a virtual or real round of applause. Thank you. That's a great presentation. I see one more quick chat coming in. Seaweed is cool, Michelle says, thank you. Yes, and E2 Tech's upcoming events are cool too, Rock Row, and then take a note of that middle one. We are working on what works. We've got a heat pump supplier and installer and people talking about our lane at E2 Tech with the workforce. The now hiring signs are everywhere. We want to work on what's specific to us. I hope to see you in person at Rock Row. Thanks to all of these people, and thank you for all you do being part of E2 Tech. A parting thought on algae to send us about our day, Ike, if you would.
Take a deep breath. Thank the algae. 50% of everything you breathe comes from algae.
There you go. What a great talk. Our events are member driven. So if you would like to take us through the amazing things you're doing in your career, like Dr. Ike did, then we'd love to hear from you for an upcoming event. We'll wrap it up there. I hope you enjoy your afternoon, getting the kids back to school and so forth like I am, and I hope to see you in Westbrook on September 16th for a tour of Rock Row. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.